and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. And this is Martin Willis, your host. And I'm coming from Novorossiysk, Russia, which is right on the Black Sea. Beautiful town. Hopping little town. Lots of people here. Our guest for this evening is Piotr Cielebias. I'm going to ask him how to pronounce that better than that. He has written a book called UFOs Over Poland in a Land of High Strangeness. Should be a great topic, great guest. Before that, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with the news in a minute. And I want to thank you listeners that support the show. You can for just $2 per month. You can listen to full shows plus the entire archives. If you can't support the show, you'd still like to listen for free, you can come to podcastufo.com every Wednesday evening at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And that's the same if you're overseas. That's the same if you Google it. New York City time, same time. And we also have a chat room on our website, so you're welcome to jump in that. And we take calls at 603-967-4030. If you also want to listen to the show for free, you can listen every Thursday at 10 to midnight Eastern Daylight Savings Time once again, and that's on the Dark Matter Digital Network. So how are you, Alejandro?
I am good. How are you, my friend?
I'm good and glad to be here so early in the morning. How is everything going over there in the States?
Everything's going really well, keeping very busy. And as usual, you know, there's lots of interesting news out there. So, which leaves me in a quandary and baffled on a regular basis.
Yeah, even when it feels like there's nothing going on, there's always something going on.
Yeah, even the weeks where the news is slow, there's something that happens. So, but days like today or weeks like this, there's a lot going on. So, which keeps things exciting. But like we'll talk about today, you know, everything's all over the board and leaves you scratching your head. What the heck?
So right. So what's the first thing you want to talk about?
That sounded like your peanut butter baby impression. And, you know, the younger people are going to crack up. Do you know who the peanut butter baby is?
No, I'm not young enough or cool enough.
It's a viral GIF out there where there's this baby sitting on a table that got into some peanut butter and spread it all over itself. And the mom walks up and goes, "What are you doing?" And the baby just looks over and goes, kind of like you just did.
And that's
it. So I thought maybe that's what you're doing. But it's hilarious. You got to see it. It's very funny. But let's talk about UFOs. So here are the couple of stories. So here are people finding different things. So I want to talk about both of these. First of all, Tom DeLonge. So, you know, we've talked about him over the years because he's a UFO buff, but he recently did some interviews with George Knapp of KLAS. He's an investigative reporter in Las Vegas, part of what they call the I-Team. You know, every local news has a team that goes and investigates, you know, wrongdoings or what have you. But George, of course, is into UFOs, one of the best UFO journalists. He's just a great journalist overall. But he's been able to become friends with Tom DeLonge, who is a superstar rock and roll guy, part of Blink-182. But Tom DeLonge has pretty much left Blink-182 and rock and roll, although he's still doing it. But he's got his own band called Angels and Airwaves, but everything he's doing now is UFO related. So he's doing these fiction. He just released a book called Secret Machines. It's the first of several books, and it's fiction based on reality. And he says, he's got these government insiders that are telling him things, and he's going to release some of this shocking information. He's essentially, like the story I wrote was Tom DeLonge says he will be the conduit for UFO disclosure. And that's what he's saying. He's saying the government has hidden information, that they've sent out disinformation. Originally, they wanted to slowly get the information out, and now he's kind of been chosen to be the guy to get the real info out there by some of these insiders. He says he'll tell more over time, but some of the things that he says they have told him is that there is a government program around UFOs. Apparently, I think he's alluding to that, there are aliens and or UFOs at Area 51. But he does say he learned that a UFO, there have been UFO crashes that have been recovered, that they have received a body that freaked out the government. And that's all he said so far. But I guess he's going to do more interviews with George Knapp as time goes on to reveal his alleged insider info.
Yeah, I've been following that, and the first thing I think of right off the bat is, why would the government or any other entity choose him to reveal all that?
He answers that question. Actually, he says they chose him because he has the ear of a younger audience, essentially, and that's the type of audience I guess they want to reach.
Wow. Do you think he has that type of following, that large of one?
He has a huge following. I mean, he's a major rock star. The issue is, are rock stars credible? And I think most people would say no. And not to this DeLonge or anything, because, we all have a lot of rock stars that we love to death, but they're just kind of like the Kardashians or something. They're not seen as, scientists, or they seem people who are prone to having some pretty wild ideas. And he has a history of having some pretty wild lyrics. So I don't know that the credibility is there. So that certainly, I think, would be an issue. And I know from writing stories, and I'm sure you find this too, when we write about celebrities and what they think about UFOs, I appreciate that they talk about it and they're bold enough to talk about their interests. But a lot of people, probably people who aren't as into whatever that person does, are like, why should I listen to that person? They're just a stupid rock star. They're just a stupid celebrity. What do they know? But so I think that's how a lot of people feel. So you're right. I don't know whether or not he would be the best person to choose. So it's a good question. I just hope that he's not being duped.
Yeah, I know we more or less talked about that a little bit on your show, and I wondered if somehow Richard Doty could be involved in this. And has he long since retired? Do you know what his status is?
No, he's still a police officer, from what I understand. Yeah. And he's a police officer in Grants, New Mexico. And he's always popping into the scene. It doesn't seem like, certainly not a year goes by without him sending an email somewhere or talking to somebody about his wild ideas and his alleged knowledge of similar things that DeLonge's talking about. I know, in fact, I've heard that he even converses with George Knapp on occasion. So, yeah, you never know. Hopefully it's not someone like that has fooled him into believing some wild stories.
So there's a Richard Doty on Facebook. I think it's Richard Doty Jr.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't believe that the real Richard Doty is on Facebook.
I see.
Yeah. I could be wrong. He could have changed, but doesn't appear. So yeah.
I know you've written about him. Have you ever thought about interviewing him directly?
Oh yeah, I didn't.
You have not.
But Jason and Maureen did.
I see.
With Open Minds about 5 years ago. So we do have that online, and in fact, I used some of the pictures from our interview with him. But he's even, he came to our conference in 2015.
Wow.
He didn't stay for very long. He only came in during Bob Lazar's talk, and then he snuck out with George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell and Bob Lazar. They all hung out together, Reuben Langdon. And because I don't know if they know him, but he certainly seems to be into Bob Lazar's story. So, yeah. Now, there's another story about a real government insider. And this comes from a very credible source. This is Leslie Kean. Actually, it comes directly from this government insider. So Leslie Kean interviewed by a man by the name of Chris Mellon. Right. Chris Mellon has worked, he's retired now, but he worked his entire career with the Department of Defense and in intelligence. And his job was to do such things as audit black projects, these compartmentalized projects, these really secret projects. So this interview is fascinating because this guy has had a lifelong interest in UFOs. He became interested when he was just a kid, and his school's principal caught on film a video, or not a video, but a movie film, because that's what they had back then, a UFO. And he said it was fascinating. He didn't believe it was hoax. He thought it was real. Ever since then, he's read everything and been really into the topic. Now, his interest in UFOs was not something he shared with his colleagues, only his friends and those colleagues who became close friends. But it's not something that he really talked about. Although one Navy personnel, a Navy man, I guess, heard about his interest and called him with this remarkable sighting that he had. But Mellon goes on to say, because Kean asked him, well, what about Clinton? Would she really be able to find anything if she looked for UFOs? And he said no. He said, I highly doubt it. First of all, compartmentalized programs, not even the Secretary of State has access to. Now, they can't lie, and they don't, they release their budgets to the government and everything. But as far as details about different programs, they just have to have a need to know. And the president wouldn't have a need to know. So most likely, she would not be able to gain access to those programs. However, beyond that, he says he doesn't think there are such programs. That he visited Area 51. He literally audited black projects, and he found no inkling of any secret UFO projects going on. He says actually something very similar to John Alexander, who was another guy, he was in Army intelligence, of course, who looked for the UFO secrets in the government and military. John Alexander assumed there were some and found that there weren't. And he says something very similar to what Chris Mellon says, which is, it's just they are so freaked out by the topic that when a real case happens, they want nothing to do with it. They don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want to be made fun of. They just feel awkward and strange about it. So they want to kind of move it along and get it off their desk as soon as possible and just try to kind of bury their head in the sand over the whole incident and move on. He's found that to be the case, which he says is extremely frustrating. And he says it's very frustrating to him that, the topic isn't taken more seriously. And so he's joined this group, UFO Data, which is a group of scientists who are hoping to kind of create some UFO listening posts, these UFO stations where they can catch video and other telemetry of UFOs to try to understand them better. And he essentially says, you're wasting your time going to the government and telling them to spill the beans about their cover-up, because all it's going to do is upset people, and they're going to be less inclined to take you seriously. He said what really needs to happen is some science, and we have to go out there and find the evidence, and that's what we have to bring to the mainstream to get them more involved, which I do agree with that, So, yeah, really interesting interview. It's somewhat lengthy. She posted that on Huffington Post. They have since been putting it on the front page of Huffington Post, and I guess it's been doing really well.
Now, I wonder if this is the status quo or the way things have changed since Project Blue Book was closed back in 1969. Or, what do you think about that?
Well, that's what's interesting, and it's hard to know. I think, I interviewed Richard Hoffman fairly recently. He's Alabama State Director for MUFON, Alabama and Mississippi, and he works in IT for defense and different intelligent groups. And he makes a few points that the information is going somewhere, that there are people with an interest, and the information is going somewhere. And he points to many cases where the government has said, like cases where they were told to send that information up, and they never see their UFO case again. And that's happened several times. Gordon Cooper, for instance, he was told, send his video to this place and it'll or when it comes to the nuclear cases. And I talked to Robert Hastings about this, where they're told, well, when they see a UFO, send that information to Air Force intelligence, and it goes there and they never hear about it. So it seems like the data is being collected. But what's being done beyond that? What can be done beyond that? Maybe there's not much they can do but file those cases away. And it's kind of like the X-Files. They have this X-Files of cold cases where, we don't know what the hell. We filed it away in our mysterious, cold cases file, and that's all we can do. If they can't really investigate something that happened in the past or something they don't understand. So in that scenario, that could be the case. And then it goes beyond, some of these things Tom DeLonge is talking about. Was there a crash? Were there aliens at Area 51? This sort of thing. Of course, if that's the case, then there's something bigger going on. But besides, the testimony of one lone person, Bob Lazar, there is no evidence whatsoever that really happened. And beyond stories, that's all we have, even with Roswell. So it's so hard. Like I said, who do you believe? The Tom DeLonge version, the Chris Mellon version? What the heck is going on?
All good stuff. Now, is that it for tonight?
That is it for tonight. One last thing, because it is a fun story. Okay. This is a story that came from MUFON. It was a MUFON report and posted by Roger Marsh. But this is a testimony from a couple who, and the husband of this married couple has since passed away. But this is from Cornwall, right on the ocean there. Essentially, these people said they got some fish and chips. They drove to the cliffs of St. Just in Cornwall to look at the water and have a nice little evening dinner there in their car. Well, they said a person came walking up the cliffs who looked like an olden time smuggler, they said, from the 17 or 1800s, and that this person had a large wooden staff and a small barrel or keg under his right arm. They said that it reminded them of the television show Poldark. If anybody's seen that, they play that on PBS here in the U.S. So they saw this guy, and it was really windy, and he disappeared. Right after that, and the reason it becomes a UFO story, is that right behind him was this white orb, this ball that kind of flew off. They said it was spinning super quickly, and even though it was windy, it wasn't affected at all by the wind, and then it flew away. So just kind of a really interesting, weird story. They felt that this perhaps ghostly apparition was related to their UFO sighting, and maybe it was a ghost, some opening a portal in a dimension. But it's just kind of a fun story that we just posted today.
And these stories can be seen on openminds.tv. And that's it. Also, I help you with the podcast with the news every Monday.
Yeah. Open Minds UFO Radio.
Righto. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
Talk to you next week.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great time out there, and have a great show.
Now, a little bit about our guest. It's really hard for me to pronounce his name. He was born in 1986 in Poland, and Piotr Cielebias holds a M.A. in history and a B.A. in political sciences. He's a well-known Polish writer and a journalist specializing in fringe science and paranormal phenomena, co-founder of Infra ufo.org.pl website collecting UFO reports, a long-term ufological publisher and contributor to ufological magazines and websites in English. He writes regularly on ONET, that's ONET.pl, the most popular Polish web portal for the, now there's a lot of things hard to pronounce here, the Niezny Świat, the oldest Polish monthly publication devoted to fringe and science and paranormal phenomena. He is the whole author of The True UFOs, a book in Polish summarizing the UFO phenomena. And so that's it in a nutshell. We'll be talking right now to Piotr. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Martin.
I probably didn't do a very good job pronouncing your name. If you wouldn't mind, could you pronounce your name for the listening audience?
My name is Piotr Cielebias, and I'm aware that it may be hard to pronounce by people speaking in English, but also many people in Poland have problems with my surname, so...
Well, that's good to know. Can you tell the listening audience, we're going to get into your book here in a minute, and it's called UFOs Over Poland, Land of High Strangeness. I like the title. It's in English. And can you tell the audience what sparked your interest in the topic?
I'm interested in UFOs and paranormal since childhood, as many other researchers and authors, but the main reason of my interest was my personal sighting of UFO when I was a child. It was a very interesting sighting, in fact, because I saw a typical flying saucer, but I wasn't abducted. I'm not a UFO buff. In fact, I tend to research the topic rather in scientific manner and from historical perspective, because I'm a historian by education, so I try to find some historical parallels in the phenomenon. But also I must say that my grandmother's stories about strange occurrences in her family also started my interest in paranormal and strange phenomena, because UFO is not only aspect of my interest in the field. I'm working as a publisher and author in Nieznany Świat magazine, in ONET.pl, where I'm writing about flying science, paranormal and other. So UFO is, as I said before, only a part of my interest.
Yep. Now, what prompted you to write this book in English? Is it also in Polish?
No, it's only in English. I become aware that many sightings and cases from Polish UFO history is not known abroad. So I decided to do some kind of summary of Polish UFO history, and show the people, the UFO community in the world, that Poland has long and very strange UFO history, because many cases contained in the book shows that the phenomenon in Poland tends to be very, very complicated. In fact, the title is connected with what I mean to say, the land of high strangeness, and many cases and UFO manifestations in Poland were of high strangeness in nature. So they contained some very unusual elements.
Well, can't wait to get into some of those. Often I've asked guests on the show when we discuss hotspots for UFOs. If there's other, paranormal activity in the area, and a lot of times there seems to be. Whether it's even goes as far as people talking about Bigfoot, ghosts, and all kind of wrapped into one area. So I would like to get into discussion. I'm not saying that's what you're talking about, but I'd like to get in discussion about some of those interesting cases. But before we do, is this a book that you will translate into Polish?
No, because all the cases in the book can be found in other publication on my website, on websites of my friends. So people in Poland may find the material in other sources, and the book itself may not be so shocking for our readers down in Poland, because they know those cases. But I'm now in editorial process of my book in Polish. It's called True UFOs, and it will appear in probably in the autumn. So,
okay.
but it's not the same material. It's very different. In True UFOs, I'm trying to summarize the phenomenon from the very beginning to present times, and show very interesting parallels from historical perspective.
Okay. And getting back to what I called the hot spots just earlier, where they have flaps or there's a lot of UFO sightings in one area, is there a place or places in Poland where that holds true?
Yes, indeed. There are several places in Poland where UFO activity is quite regular and high. I'm in two places. First is Glinik. Glinik is a village in Rzeszów area. Is a southeastern tip of Poland. Maybe not the tip, but it's close to Slovak and Ukrainian border. And it's a very strange place, because it's a normal village at the first glance, but people there are holding stories from the past, from decades ago, about very strange phenomena. For example, they say that the village in 1960s and on was a place of very strange activities of flying humanoids, mini UFOs, and so on. But the activity in Glinik is not typically ufological. Many aspects of the phenomenon are different. For example, people saw their flying humanoids, but some other people may mistake the manifestations with ghosts. So those entities were looking as were similar to some kind of specters or so, but there were also manifestation of typical flying saucers in Glinik. The situation and the whole history of the village is described in one of the chapters of UFOs Over Poland. My friend Arek Miazga, who was researching the story, is certain that something strange is going on in Glinik, but it's not a regular activity. It's coming in waves. For example, now there is complete silence in Glinik. Nothing is going on, but probably in 2010 there was a very strange incident when two men from Glinik saw a tall, dark figure lurking in the field they were very scared. So Glinik is one of hotspots of UFO and paranormal hotspots in Poland, but there are also other ones. For example, in Częstochowa area where I live, there's a place called Oson Hill. Oson is a name of some man who was a local, who was one of the locals. It's a name of a man who ran a airfield in the area of the hill, and that become Oson Hill. The area is also a place of strange activity, but of another kind, other kind than in Glinik, because Oson Hill is known in the area from manifestation of flying objects. In 2002, my friend Grzegorz Tarczyński saw one of these objects, and that was a very strange incident because he met a flying sphere, and when he was in his car, and when he blinked the headlights of his car, the sphere repeated the signal. So it means that the object was probably intelligent. Some people say that in Oson Hill area the incidents are of natural nature, can be explained, for example, by some kind of atmospherical phenomena as ball lightning, but I never heard about ball lightning repeating the light signal. I received many reports from Oson Hill. They may be not so spectacular as in Glinik, but in 2014 there was a very interesting incident in the area, because the Oson Hill is near local foundry, Częstochowa foundry, very, very large plant. And in 2014 I got a report from a pair from Częstochowa. The main witness said that he saw, along with her girlfriend, a very interesting object that made their car to stop, that made their cell phones to break down, and it was just a small ball of light standing in the ground, but its electromagnetic, but its force, its influence was so high that their car, their cell phones, and other instruments were broken down. So it's also very interesting. About other hotspots, it's hard to say, because in other parts of Poland the UFO activity is not restricted to for example, villages or some other kinds of or some other occasions. Rzeszów city is also a place of high activity of UFOs, but the manifestations aren't concentrated in one area. Also, for example, Wrocław, big city in western Poland, is also a kind of UFO hotspot, but it's not so restricted. It's not restricted to one region or one point, but to the bigger area. So if we talk about this kind of phenomena, I also must mention about Bigfoots, because I like the topic, and many people may be may be surprised, but by the fact that in Poland we also got very interesting reports about. I may not call it Bigfoot, but about people say about strange monsters. I received very many reports about strange creators.
Do you call Bigfoot Yeti in Poland?
No, it's not Yeti. In Poland, we have no tradition of Bigfoots and hairy hominids, but in some recent years, we got many reports from people reporting some strange creatures, and it's very interesting because there are no. They aren't present in Polish folklore, but now they are appearing for some reason, and that's very strange. People saying, for example, that they encountered them in woods, and it's hard to believe because I have never seen about Bigfoot in Poland, but now the cases become to emerge. So it's hard to say what is the reason of the activity. Are the Bigfoots living creatures, or maybe they are a product of some kind of some kind of paranormal force?
Mm-hmm. Well, before there's some questions I want to ask you about what you just said, but where do you report sightings? You mentioned that you take some reports, but is there any type of national reporting center in Poland?
No, and there never was. Along with my friends, with Arek Miazga, with Damian Trela, and many others, we are forming a kind of collective, informal collective. And we are sharing the information about sightings, but it must be said that in this year the UFO activity is very low, so we have not many reports.
Oh, it changes all the time, I'm sure, and a lot of the time people would not have any idea where to report something to begin with. Now, what is the ridicule factor like in Poland?
It's very complicated because since accession of Poland into NATO structures, it's become very complicated to speak publicly about UFOs. I don't know the exact reason, but I think that Polish Air Force is restricting the information, is trying to ridicule the topic because they know that every comments about unexplained activity over Poland may be connected, for example, in the eyes of Americans, to Russian activity. So it may be a matter of fear that the Polish Air Force is not saying publicly about UFO cases, fearing of ridicule of the other countries. And for example, Polish television is not covering the topic only small part of media are interested in in the UFO activity, but internet is the main source of information about that kind of phenomena. Mainstream media seems not to be interested at all in the topic.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. Now, going back to some of the sightings you just talked about, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. First of all, can you give details of this flying humanoids cases or case?
Flying humanoids, and at some point in the past, were very common, because from the beginning of this century, I received many cases about strange figures floating in the middle. But then I received also some older cases, so I maybe start with a very interesting story from Western Poland. In 1969, a group of young men, boys, teenagers were returning to Lasów village from the cinema, and on their way they meet with a strange figure. It was not very tall. It was of the average height, but the head of the entity was gray. It looked like a plasticine, maybe, with a kind of aureola of halo about the head, a blue body. And the main witness who reported me the story said that if he was a religious person, he would mistook the being with angel, because it looks so similar to angel. The boys looked at the being who was standing just by them, and rushed to it, thinking that it may be some kind of, I don't know, prankster or so. And the alleged angel become probably scared and began running. And while running from the boys, it was not touching the ground, because it was flying just over the ground. And they become very scared, because they saw that it is nothing natural. So that was the Lasów case, also covered in the book. The next interesting case with flying humanoid took place at Borne-Sulinowo in 2008. The main witness, an elderly woman, contacted me and say that during a trip with her husband to Borne-Sulinowo, she met a strange floating transparent figure. And Borne-Sulinowo is a ruined city, is a former base of Red Army in Poland. It's a military complex now abandoned, and when the pair split, the man went in one side, and his woman and his wife headed in the other direction. She said that at some moment she realized that some kind of semi-transparent entity is floating in the air. It looked like a man with crossed arms. It was very big, and the being looking as camouflaged predator from the movie with Schwarzenegger. Just passed above the woman. She was panicked. She wasn't able to move. and when the entity passed and disappeared in the woods, she ran to the car and screamed for her husband. Another very interesting case with flying humanoids took place in a small village in the Rzeszów area, and it's called Manastyr, and it took place in 2005 in autumn, when a family from the village saw that a very strange shape is coming from the sky to the woods, to the nearby woods. It looked like a landing of a flying humanoid in the woods. They become very scared, but they decide to run to the woods and check what it was. And when they reached the forest, they couldn't find the being, but feared some strange presence in that place. So to sum up, I'm not able to say exactly what flying humanoid would be, but I think that they had something in common with the broader nature of the UFO phenomenon, the nature that is not completely understood by us, because we look at UFOs through the perspective of flying saucers and green men, but there are also some other manifestations that are very, very strange, but are also embraced by the term UFO or ufological. So flying humanoids may show the very complex nature of UFO phenomena.
Wow, that's interesting. And the thing you said about the angel almost could make one speculate that, people were drawing angels, and the whole creation of angels in our history may have had to do with something that person saw. Just maybe going out on a limb by saying something like that, but it's still very interesting. And
I would also add something. I also heard about a case in Poland. I not remember the place of the incident, but there was a UFO sighting in one village. A man saw a flying ball with some kind of shape inside the ball, and then he was so excited and so charmed by the incident that he built a small chapel in the place of the incident.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Saying that it was a manifestation of Virgin Mary. So angel is not only thing that people may mistook with UFO.
Well, I had a past guest on that said that there was a few encounters where there were orbs where it appeared to be something inside the orb, which like a moving entity or something, which is pretty interesting. And you were talking earlier about the reaction to light that one orb or whatever it was had, and there's a number of cases where there's a reaction to like an intelligent reaction to someone either flashing a flashlight or, like you mentioned, a car light. Very interesting. Are there a lot of other cases in Poland where there's some type of electromagnetic reaction, like there was with that car and cell phone of that one case?
Mm-hmm. I know many cases with that kind of reaction of, for example, cars, cell phones on UFO activity. But the most interesting one and most controversial one, because I don't know exactly what caused the incident was the fishing boat meeting with a strange orb, flying ball on the Baltic Sea in 1980s, and the case was probably never explained because it happened in a time of when not everything might be published in newspapers. It happened on the Baltic Sea when a fishing boat of Schomburg family encountered a strange object over the waters. It was just hovering over the sea in some distance from them, and at some point something strange began to happen with the crew. Some say that they were nearly paralyzed by strange force. They think that their state has something in common with the strange object in the distance, but they weren't able even to ask for help because they were paralyzed. They lost energy. One of the men even temporarily lost sight. They weren't able to call for help. The captain of the boat, being on his last legs, standed by the steering wheel and tried to get to the port, but it was very hard to him to maneuver the ship, being in the constant under the constant influence of the object. So Schomburg case was very controversial because when they finally reached the port, they were checked by paramedics, and the case went silent, totally silent. Even today, no one knows what exactly happened with those people. Some months ago, I talked with Emma Popik. Emma Popik is a Polish UFO researcher and journalist, and she wrote about Schomburg case, and she is also not certain what may happen, what may cause the incident. She suggested me that it was a kind of experiment with electromagnetic weapons, but I'm not very sure about that explanation. The witnesses themselves also not present in the media. They just disappeared. They're probably living very quiet lives, and the case remained mystery. And it's the most interesting case of some kind of influence of UFO on the witnesses.
Wow, interesting. That's a good one. Now, you are a historian, so I would like to talk a little bit about historic UFO sightings, and why don't you go into that a little bit as far as how far back that they're recorded that you're aware of, and bring it forward, if you would, into some of the highlights of some of the cases.
To be honest, I don't know many historical Polish UFO cases because at some point of historical recordings at some levels, strange reports become very similar to, for example, ordinary reports about astronomical events. So I'm very suspicious about some historical chronics and sources, but one of the most interesting cases from the past took place in just before the great battle of Vienna, when Polish King Jan Sobieski was heading on the battle with his soldiers, and saw very, very interesting phenomenon that was probably not an astronomical phenomenon, but a kind of other manifestation, maybe a UFO. And the description of the event may be found in the book. I also remember and that was in the 17th century. I also remember another record from some kind of historical source from Szczecin area, but that took place in present Poland. But the witness was a German boy then, and he saw that. He related to the author of the chronicle that he saw some kind of entity, a white angel, descending from some kind of object. So that was also a very, very interesting and suggestive manifestation. If we talk about 19th century or 12th century, we also can find some more interesting reports about unexplained activity in the sky. In 19th century, we can find in Polish sources reports about flying balloons with spotlights seen, for example, in Podkarpacie area, in Rzeszów area. The witnesses reported seeing objects that they took for balloons, but they were probably the same airships that were seen in USA during the great wave of from the end of 19th century. But in 12th century, before the Arnold sighting, there were very, very interesting reports from Poland. For example, in Warsaw, in 1920s, there was an incident involving flying saucer that nearly landed in Warsaw, in one of the districts in Warsaw. The witnesses reported that it looked like two plates joined together, and the object, according to the witness, got very near to the ground and then went up, but it almost looked like a crash landing. Then there were some cases from World War II, also very interesting. For example, a case from Nowiny. Nowiny is in eastern Poland, in Zamość area, but the case was researched in 1980s because it took place a long time for the witness to review the story.
Really? Wow.
And the witness said, the only living witness of the incident, say that during the war in 1943, a strange craft landed by their hut, by their house, and some very strange men emerged from the object. The witness said that they were short, they were in strange helmets, and tried to communicate with the witnesses. At some point, two witnesses from the house went off and approached the object. And while approaching, they were temporarily paralyzed, probably, and fall to the ground. Uh-huh. The beings from the object try to call them. They show. They pointed to the craft, and and try to prompt the witnesses to approach and enter the craft, enter aboard, but it didn't happen. Then also we have some interesting case in Warsaw, another time in Warsaw, during the Jewish uprising, just before the Jewish uprising in Warsaw, occupied by German forces, by Hitler army, and the case was witnessed by Kazimierz Brzozowski. Kazimierz Brzozowski was a Polish UFO researcher, and in 1943 he was a young boy living in Warsaw, and at one time when he was in the Jewish ghetto, he saw a strange object hovering in the air. It was as Brzozowski said, full of colors inside. It looked like it was a ball with a mix of many colors inside, and the object was hovering over houses, very low over the ground, and Germans and Latvian soldiers began to shot to the object, but the bullets have no effect on the UFO. So it looked for the Brzozowski as if the object was inspecting the Warsaw, the what is going on down in the occupied city. So it does.
The last thing I would ever do if I had a gun on me and saw a UFO would be dare to shoot at it. I can't believe, I've heard of that before, but you would think if they have the intelligence to get here, they could just zap you somehow, put you out of existence. All right, everyone, that's it for the free part of the show. If you'd like to support us for only $2 a month or more, you can go to Support Us menu on our website, podcastufo.com. It's a one-time sign-in. You can do yearly, or you can do a monthly subscription, and you can get access to all the 2-hour shows and archives and upcoming shows. And if you can't, if you want to listen for free, remember you can listen at podcastufo.com every Wednesday at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our guest next week is Erica Lukes, and I want to thank you all for listening, and we'll see you here next week right here on Podcast UFO. Keep your eyes to the sky.